Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to the ELLC monthly roundup. My name is Debbie, and I will be hosting the conversation for this month. And joining me, three lovely people, Carla from the Netherlands that works with Excel leaders, Chaffone from Belfast that works with the YWAM community there, and Wolfgang from Switzerland, who is a coach and a leadership and cultural coach. And so welcome everybody. So glad that you took the time to join us and to discuss all the content for this month. Our topic has been emotional intelligence. And so that's an exciting and important topic for leaders of all categories and all kinds. And we've had really great material and content, I think, in a very diverse perspective as well. I'm gonna start with you, Carla. What resonated with you as you listened to the material this month?
Yeah, I was especially touched. There were a lot of good things, let me say that first. But the one thing that really touched me was that someone said, like, when you are in a relation, when you are in a conversation with people, you're dealing with people, go for the relationship and not for the truth. So having a relationship higher than the truth, and especially when it comes to conflict. I found that very, very good. I think I knew it, but it was like in my face all of a sudden. And so I realized that is an area where I need to focus on, because maybe that's part of my cultural background, being Dutch. That truth is a high value, or maybe it's a personal value, even make it worse or better. I don't know. And so I want to learn to go more for relationship and to, yeah, and to, when I'm talking to other people, be my first thing that will drive me.
Yeah, that's great. Alongside that, Johan mentioned something on the Leadership Lounge. It was like, the better relationship you have with people that you lead, the more you can have difficult conversations, because then you're not too worried that you're going to break relationship because you're discussing something potentially negative. And so I thought that was really great how he worded it, and I think it's true. But thank you for sharing that. Relationships are quite key. Chaffone, what did you hear? What did you listen to? You were sharing something earlier about the Leadership Lounge, so maybe you could continue in that vein.
Yeah, there were a lot of great nuggets in the information shared this month, but something that I've been reflecting on quite a bit came out of the Leadership Lounge when Lona was sharing a little bit about the cultural aspect of emotional intelligence. And I think she had shared that she just kind of went through a transition, going from leading in Asia and then back to, I think, Norway, and how the expectations culturally would be different in those two settings. And that just feels really significant to me for us as YWAM. And even Carla just kind of referenced that as well, of just that awareness of the proclivities of our cultural tendencies, how we communicate, and how does that relate to the different things that we've talked about this month. So the crucial conversations that John shared, and there was another video as well about that. And the way that I might have a crucial conversation with someone from another country or another culture, it's not that the heart behind that, or that even the content is necessarily going to be different, but maybe the packaging needs to be adjusted to fit better, and so that it can be received in the right way. So I just think that that's always a significant piece for us as we consider this whole thing of emotional intelligence and what does that look like in our leadership.
Yeah, I feel like that is particularly relevant to us in YWAM, because we're so diverse, like we come from literally all over the world. So being able to have a conversation as a Nigerian with a Swiss is quite different. And so how do you navigate that? How do you not compromise truth and honesty with the way that you present what it is that you want to talk about? I think that that's a good challenge, to learn how to practice that and do both well. Yeah. Wolfgang, what stood out to you?
I think a thread that for me seemed to come through all the reading and listening or watching was how important it is that my emotional intelligence or self-awareness is needing to be continually increased about myself, what I'm experiencing, as well as that I approach others with that and giving them space to reflect and become aware. And whereas where I make probably the most mistakes in my leadership and work is that I take too little time to reflect. So I'm just too busy, too occupied. And then in, let's say, some of those crucial, necessary conversations or conflicts, I have not taken time to be aware of my own biases, my assumptions, my judgments, my own heart, my business I haven't taken care of with that person or the team. And that impacts me then, and as well as how well that conversation or that relationship will go or not. And that really struck me how that just seemed, for me at least, it came through in these various pieces that were well written and shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's that whole dynamic with the self versus the other person you're talking with. Because I think it was Holger that talked about how you can approach a conflict from your own story or from your own side. And it's really, really important to not just do that, but also to try to look at things from the other person's perspective, but to also get better at this thing called listening. So he mentioned listening to oneself, listening to others, but also listening to God. And I think that when we do all three, that forms like a pretty holistic picture of understanding what the nature of a conflict truly is, but also navigating our way out of it so that we can have better relationships. Right, so what else stood out to you guys before I ask how you guys have seen this in your lives, or maybe you've heard a story or have experiences, whether good or bad? Like, what else stood out to you guys?
I think one other thing that stood out was, like it said, get to know your team members outside the normal relationships you have. So if you work with someone in the same room, you kind of get to know the person in that setting, but outside that setting, he might or she might be very different. And so it said doing team building might look silly because you do silly games and you do silly stuff. But in the end, the goal is to get to know that person in another setting and to see how this person reacts. And for me, that makes all of a sudden sense why team building is so important. I never put that together, but now I'm like, okay, now I understand. And that helps me to have a good attitude when you do a silly game, you know?
Yes, it has a purpose all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Carla. Thank you.
Yeah, something that, just to build on that for me, is also in team building or in relational situations with team members that are really focus on and desire to actually get to know the other person. And that means I need to put everything else aside and learn that being really how to be fully present with them. So what impacts me is not getting in the way to be present and really hear them. And I find that often quite challenging, especially when there's already some emotional buildup that's not all positive.
Yeah, true. Chaffone,
Yeah.
have any other thoughts? Oh, yeah.
Go. Yeah, sorry. I think with that too, just that reminder, you know, it's talked about a lot, this whole thing of vulnerability. But I think to really get to know your team, to really build those relationships, there is no way around that. Mm-hmm. And so I think just that reminder too of the self-awareness piece of how am I practicing vulnerability in my team? How am I walking that out in my leadership as I connect with, whether it's even my team or even people that we're serving, or, you know, just that awareness piece, I think is really key as well. And I think sometimes it's almost talked about so much culturally right now that we can, at least for me, I can become kind of almost desensitized to it. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, vulnerability, blah, 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 you know, but actually just that reminder for us of no, like really, how am I walking that out now? And what does that look like in my life? And where do I need to even lean into that more?
Mm. Yeah, I think that that's a really, really important point you made, because I think, yeah, we become desensitized very quickly, because it's become a very cultural, cool thing to say, the word vulnerability, or to talk about it, but to slow down and be honest and go, am I practicing this in my own life? How am I embodying this thought? And that segues nicely, I think, into my next kind of question, which is, what experiences have you guys had in this area, like that you would like to share as a personal story or something you've witnessed happen? I imagine, Wolfgang, because you are a coach, that you might have examples of that for us. But yeah, just really a story or two about how you see emotional intelligence play out.
Well, maybe just on that cultural or cross-cultural piece that so often impacts us unconsciously. I remember some years ago when I was working in Bulgaria, how vulnerability, just because that's the word that's just popped up here, is perceived as a total weakness in leadership. So it's not something that is being embraced. And so I had to learn as well, and that was a great lesson for other situations where I'm still learning, how do I bridge that gap of something that is important for leaders to learn that's not accepted in their culture, or it's looked down upon, or Westerners might more quickly be vulnerable and other cultures will need a lot more time to become vulnerable. And that I'm not pushing my agenda for vulnerability with leaders who just need a lot more time and build more relationships so they could actually be more vulnerable in that context. So there's like a range of sensitivity needed. So it's not my thing becomes the agenda and I look down upon people who are not opening up or just feeling very uncomfortable. And so I think that Western and other mindsets that we just I need to grow in that respect. There are other ways. There's another timetable. There are other approaches that might feel in turn very foreign to me, and therefore also equally uncomfortable. And so that I find quite challenging, but it's often very helpful to start having conversations about with people, so we glean and learn and benefit from their other perspectives that are just different, not better or worse.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. I think it's very insightful. You see how it's not just a thought, that it's called cross-cultural, is actually lived and experienced. And I love how you highlighted that there are different ways. We just need to navigate it. You mentioned the term fully present, and that's something that I use quite a bit myself. It's like, you need to figure out how to be fully present, and that looks different for different people. But the goal is the same. But thanks for sharing that story. Any other stories?
Yeah, I just, as I'm reflecting on what Wolfgang shared as well, I was thinking about a context. And again, it's a bit of cross-cultural, but also, like team communication. I was in a YWAM situation where I was teaching English, and I had a very diverse group of students. And there were probably a good 4 or 5 from a few different Asian countries, and really, really like wonderful group of students. And one of my assistants came, this is probably after the first week of classes, one of my assistants came, and she was also from one of those Asian countries. And she said, Chaffone, can you stop smiling so much when you teach? Because all of the Asian students feel like you're not taking them seriously. And because in both of the countries that they were from, apparently, because studying is more of an academic, like it's a very serious, kind of thing. And I was like, how am I going to not smile while I teach? And then all my other students are going to think I'm so rude. But I was so thankful in the end, as I processed it with her, that she had the courage to actually raise that and actually flag that for me, because I would have never thought, coming from my American mindset, my American culture, very Western culture, I would have never thought that smiling could be perceived that way. And what it did was actually opened it up to where then as a class, we could have a really good conversation about cultural differences that opened up other areas where there were misunderstandings as well. So I think that taught me an important lesson that, as my teammate having the courage, that maybe it was a little uncomfortable, probably even for her to raise that. But I was so thankful because I learned from that and probably saved maybe weeks or worse, months of students, feeling misunderstood or not valued. So I think that was an important lesson for me, cross-cultural team and communication and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such an unusual story, but that's very true. It's like, who thinks smiling is inappropriate? But yeah, it wasn't. And like you said, it's really great that we get to communicate this stuff that are seemingly uncomfortable. Thank you, Chaffone. Carla?
I'm just thinking about something I have recently started to do. It's outside YWAM, it's in my church. This is a season we don't travel so much, so I have been engaged working with teenagers, what is not a group that I work a lot with or have worked a lot with, but there was a need and I felt that it was something I could be helpful to. And so in a way, it's for me a different culture that I need to learn because I'm quite a bit older than them. And, we're talking about faith and faith related subjects, and the way they approach this is so different from when I grew up and what I had experienced. So I'm also learning new things, from those younger kids. They probably don't even realize that. And also how to word things, to communicate with them. It's very different, and also to be of encouragement and let them find their own path in, finding their own way of expressing their faith, or if they want to follow it or not, So for me, I'm not there yet, but I'm learning a lot, I tell you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you guys so much. I think it's wonderful to hear how the content has resonated with different people, and all of us here from different places. And so it's different perspectives that come together. We hope the listeners, this gives you an insight or a taste of all the different content that has been produced this month, and inspires you to go check it out. But I think we're going to stop here. And once again, thank you so much. And I hope that in the future, we get to discuss another topic.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.